Yay, I'm so excited to be sitting here today with Katie Cawood. Is that how you say your last name? Cawood?
It's Cawood. There should be a Y in there.
Katie Cawood, that's so cute.
Thanks.
What are those, like, what do you call those when it's like the two words have the same, like,
my alliteration.
Beginning? An alliteration, yeah.
Yeah.
Katie Cawood, that's so cute. Sorry, okay. Sitting here today with Katie Cawood, so excited.
Me too.
Just as a little bit of an introduction. So Katie is an indie author. Are you a parent? You have children?
Yeah, I have a 12-year-old son.
Oh, okay, so you got your hands full. So you're an author, also a mom.
Yes.
You released your first book, Lesson Learned. That was August of last year.
Mm-hmm. And
then you have your next book coming out, which also takes place at Grissom Elementary.
Yes, it does.
And that's coming out on March 29th. So by the time this airs, that'll be just a couple weeks away, which is really exciting. I was just actually saw that you posted about ARC readers. I was like, oh, I should sign up to try to be an ARC reader for that.
Yeah, and I totally meant to have an ARC for you ready before we did this podcast interview, just so you would know a little bit more about it going into this. But the whole process of finishing and editing this book, like everything with this second book took me longer than I expected. So it just wasn't quite ready yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah, that's totally fine. It builds the tension a little bit.
Yeah, there you go.
So in true ABF fashion, before we get started, we'll do a little bit of a cheers. Katie, what are you drinking?
I'm actually drinking peach schnapps with pineapple juice. That's kind of my go-to.
Yum. Oh, that sounds so tasty.
Yeah, I love it.
I have got a little bit of work to do tonight, so I've got a cranberry pomegranate yerba mate to kind of keep my energy up.
Yeah, that sounds delicious.
It's also not quite 5 o'clock here, so I have to earn my cocktail.
Yeah, it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah. So before I jump into some questions I have about the book and your writing journey, I wanted to just give you like a little bit of a background about my experience reading Lesson Learned.
Okay.
So somebody had recommended the book to me, and I actually get this from my fiancé because he's a really big proponent of like movie trailers ruin movies, like especially when it's like a horror movie or a comedy, like you only can get really truly scared once, or like you can really only laugh at a good punchline like the first time. And so he really avoids watching movie trailers. And I kind of adopted something similar with books. Like I really try not to read the backs of books first. I've actually found that I've done that before and then read the book and was like, I feel like I like the book so much more than what was conveyed on the back cover. And maybe if I had read the back cover, like I wouldn't have read it. And so
that makes sense.
to avoid doing that. And so I didn't really know anything about your book. I just knew that you were an indie author and you had written this cute romance about teachers. And so I jumped right in. And it was a lot of like Owen's posturing, and then once they got to the holiday party scene, I was like, oh my gosh, this is Pam and Jim. Like this is like modeled after The Office. And,
for sure.
And I was like, oh no, like I had just gotten engaged in March. And so I was like, I don't want to see, like I had a hard time liking Pam after a while. Like the whole dynamic was uncomfortable. And then I was already in that like just engaged honeymoon phase. And so I was like, this book might be hard for me to read right now, but I'm gonna get through it because I like these characters and we'll see how it goes. Honestly, I loved them. Like I was very surprised by how much I liked Sarah and how much they're like coming to be. I like fell in love with. I honestly was thinking like this is going to be a hard one for me to like, and I loved it. You did such an amazing job. And so when I reached out to you to get on the podcast, I was like, I'm so excited to talk about, like, I hope that you find that to be such a compliment that it was like a trope that I kind of was like, I don't know about this, and I love it. It was so good.
I do, and I've heard that from a few people that they weren't really sure, especially because it's my debut. They're not really sure going into what this is going to be all about, or if they're going to like these characters, you know. And I think they ended up finding them really relatable and likable, and that is a huge compliment. Like that's the best compliment.
Yeah, you had a really nice balance of like Sarah does things and you're like, oh, don't do that.
Yeah.
Like the sweatshirt scene when they're like, and I was like, oh God, you're the worst.
they definitely push the button a little bit, you know, and they do some things that maybe we wouldn't necessarily do, or like, I think it's maybe things that maybe our friends would do, and we'd be like, hey, like, I think maybe you crossed the line here. You need to step back a little bit, you know. They're human, you know. The both of them make mistakes in this book, and I think that just makes them very real, you know.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely felt very genuine and like, wow, this is a really hard choice. Like you thought
Yeah.
that you were gonna, this was your forever person, and sometimes things just don't work out that way. It felt very real and very genuine.
Well, good. I like to hear that.
What made you want to write this story? Like, are you a big fan of The Office or?
Definitely, for sure. Well, I actually started out, I started to kind of plot or outline a book about teachers that was more of like an enemies to lovers type story. And I just wasn't feeling it. Friends to lovers is definitely like my go-to trope.
Mhm.
And so I just sort of scrapped that idea. And I actually just woke up one night and just wrote in the notes app on my phone, what about a storyline like Jim and Pam, but make them teachers? And
Mhm.
that's just kind of where Lesson Learned was born, you know? So that's sort of where it stemmed from.
Were there any like quintessential The Office scenes that you were like, I want to try to translate this into this book, or like anything about Jim and Pam that you were like, I really want this piece to come out in this book?
Nothing specific, like no specific scene, but I definitely wanted to kind of capture the essence of their dynamic, just how, you know, Jim had been pining for Pam this whole time, but she's with somebody else, you know, and then there's the whole part where Karen comes in the office, you know, and I think he even had the other girlfriend, Katie, I think I should
Mhm.
remember that. It's my name. But, you know, so when he had a couple other people that he dated too, that he wasn't really that into. And so I kind of did want to bring that aspect into it, which is why I brought in Kendall. So that's kind of where that came from.
Is Bertha like the water cooler kind of? Like it's
Yeah,
like
I
their
guess so.
convenience
Yeah.
space?
And I will say, I sort of put this in my Instagram stories the other day. Bertha is a recurring character. She makes an appearance in the second book. And just in case people are listening and they're like, who the heck is Bertha? Bertha is the copy machine. And she appears in the first book in Lesson Learned when there's just this heated scene, not like a spicy type of heat, but an argument between Owen and Sarah. And they're dealing with this old copier named Bertha. And Bertha appears in the second book, and it's a totally different type of scene. Speaking of that spicy kind of heat. So Bertha has seen some stuff.
Yeah, that scene broke my heart. That scene was, yeah, Bertha
Yeah.
has seen some rough times.
Yeah. And that scene in Lesson Learned is honestly, that was my favorite to write. I feel like that is probably the most emotional scene in the book, just because all of their feelings are spilling out. You know, they say some kind of hateful things to each other. That they don't necessarily mean. You know, I think Owen even says like, I'm done with you, or he just needs a break from her, you know, and she's not really sure how to take that, you know. And to me, that scene is, I guess, more exciting, or it was just more thrilling than the spicy scenes in the book, you know.
Yeah, I always like to say that you can't really appreciate a happy ending if they didn't have to work for it. So
Exactly.
I'm a big fan of pain in books and like struggle and turmoil to get to where they are, because it feels like the ending is so much more rewarding that way. So
Yeah.
I love to be broken apart and then put back together again.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I've definitely put them through it.
Yes, you did. You made us work for it for sure.
Yeah.
Did anything ever happen with that first like enemies to lovers book that you were writing? Is that just like living somewhere in your desk drawer?
It's like a lot of my manuscripts, it's just living somewhere. It's just in a file that I'll probably never look at again. I will mention though, I try not to talk about book 3 a whole lot because I'm currently marketing book 2, which is not out yet. But book 3 is going to sort of have the enemies to lovers trope. So like I've kind of tucked away some of the conversations and the banter that I had planned for that first book. And I'm using that in book 3. So
That's
it's there.
fun. That's exciting. Well, I'll try to avoid temptation to ask you too much about that.
Yeah.
Did you have any struggles with Lesson Learned? Like, I don't know, like, did you find it hard to keep Sarah likable, or like to find a way to actually have this play out like real characters, but make sure that them like they get a good redemption at the end?
Yeah, I did, especially with Sarah. And I feel like readers are a little bit more hard on female main characters when they are flawed. You know, I feel like we are all into the morally gray male main character, you know, but when
Sure.
a female makes mistakes, I feel like a lot of times readers are just a lot less willing to forgive them, you know. So I kind of had to tread a line there where, Sarah is a real person who's making mistakes. She's got this choice to make. She does some things that are just a little bit questionable, but I still wanted her to be likable. So for my like second or third draft, or my third read through, I realized I don't really explain very well why she is still with Eli. Like, why is she with this guy if he's such a jerk to her? So initially in that first draft, I didn't have very much in there about, okay, they were high school sweethearts, and this is kind of the only relationship that she's ever really known. She doesn't have a whole lot of dating experience, and she's scared. She knows that she's attracted to Owen. She knows that she's falling in love with Owen, but she's been with Eli for so long and she feels safe and secure. And she's just kind of like, well, what if I, leave him and that's the wrong choice? She's just scared. And so I kind of had to work that into the draft and kind of just explain where she's coming from a little bit better so that readers aren't like, okay, why doesn't she just walk away? I had to just explain it better.
Yeah, I think that really comes through when they visit her family over the holidays and like her sister, and like all of them are very close with him. He's been in the scene for a long time, and it's like you're not just like ending your relationship with them, you're ending your family's relationship with them, and the other way around.
And I had originally thought too that I might make her family kind of not like Eli a whole lot and just be done with him also, but I'm just like, you know what, let's make that choice even harder for her. Let's make her family really love Eli, because that's just going to make it so much harder for her to walk away. Your family likes him and this is all you've ever known. And like, it just makes that choice even harder.
Do you think that lots of authors do that? Like, you say it's going to make it hard for Sarah, but that means it makes it hard for you. Like, do you think that they do this kind of challenge thing? Like, let's see if I can work my way out of this. Like, let's see if I can pull this off.
I think a lot of authors do that. And I've seen that advice. Like, you've got to raise the stakes a little bit, because if it's too easy for your characters to make this decision, then where's the conflict? How are you going to drag this out for several more chapters? You just got to make things a little hard for them and make them cry a little bit, put them through it.
Yeah, that's true. That's funny. Were any of your other characters based off of like people from like TV shows or anyone like Kendall, or like I feel like Principal Cates, I think his name was, was a very distinct person. I was wondering where you got the idea for him.
He's sort of a combination of a lot of past managers I think I've had and people I've worked with. And I don't know if anybody has noticed this, but I never gave him a first name in the book. And he's just always been Cates or Principal Cates. I never mentioned what his first name is. So he's a little bit mysterious, But I had a lot of fun with that character. He was one of my favorite characters to write, and he will also make an appearance in the second one briefly. But
amazing.
Yeah, he's just kind of a combination of a lot of manager type people that I've known.
And so when you were writing book one, you knew that Kendall was going to be a reoccurring person. She was going to get her own story.
I only knew that halfway through. And Kendall was initially going to be somebody that was going to be easy to hate. You're going to be like, okay, this is not the right person for Owen. I don't like her. She's, just get her out of the way so you can get to Sarah, and just kind of like we talked about earlier, I needed to make things a little bit more difficult for him. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make her kind of sweet, and she does do a couple things that are questionable, like kind of flirting with him at school and like being a little touchy-feely in front of the school secretary, he's not a big fan of that. But and then I just realized like, okay, I really like this character, and my beta readers responded really well to her. And so I'm like, okay, she's going to get the second book. So I had to do that because I fell in love with her while writing her.
Yeah, she's a doll. I mean, I even was like, Sarah, how we can't compete with Kendall. You can't dislike her. She's the best.
Yeah. She calls her teacher Barbie, and then they end up being pretty good friends. So
yeah, that's cute. I saw your post recently about how you really like nerdy golden retriever guys. Yeah. And there was a couple faces in there that really stuck out to me. One of them being Nick Miller. I'm obsessed with Nick Miller.
Me too.
Do you have plans for him somewhere in a book sometime?
Distant plans. Okay.
Distant plans.
I do have a character, and as I have a lot of books plotted out. I'll just say that. This Woodvale series is going to be a 5-book series. So I have those 5 books planned out. And then I've got like a few standalones on the back burner, and I've got an idea for a Nick Miller type character. And I'm totally picturing Nick Miller as I outline this book, but I've got a standalone plan for him. I feel like I've got something planned for all the guys that were in that collage of, the like kind of beta male, nerdy, sarcastic type. I've got plans for a lot of those guys.
Yeah, as like a type A, I'm not quite as quirky as Just Day. And I don't have as much energy as her.
Yeah, who does?
But I'm 100 years old at heart, so that part of Nick I understand. But like,
yeah,
dating somebody like him would drive me insane. But I find him so his just simpleness. He's just so charming. I love him so much.
Yeah, and his grumpiness. He's so funny.
Is Mason based off of anyone, like loosely?
Not really. And it's so funny because I feel like Mason doesn't quite fit into that little collage that I made of those types of characters. Like the more I wrote Mason, the less I made him like that type of guy. Because Mason's a little bit cocky, and some of those guys are too. But he's not really that much of a nerd. He's kind of he's an artsy guy, so I guess that kind of counts. But he's just got that confidence, and he's really flirty. Like in the first book, there's the scene where Owen calls Sarah baby for the first time when they're getting ready to, and he gets so nervous about it, and he panics for a minute, until she reacts and she responds well to it, Whereas in my second book, in Love Lessons, Mason is calling her baby in chapter 4, kind of as a joke to just sort of test the waters a little bit. And he wants to make her blush, and he does, So he's a lot more confident than Owen, and more confident than most of the male characters that I'm used to writing.
So that's like another challenge for you as writing.
Yeah, a little bit. But I had so much fun with him, though.
And then you've also written a single dad, which I think is also is a very tough. It's a great feat to have if you could do it well, because kids getting in the mix can sometimes like you're in the way, you're taking away from the romance. Yeah. Let them be alone.
Right. Yeah, it can really complicate things. But Mason's daughter Finley, I think she's like the third main character in this book. And I had to be really careful about that because, like you just said, like some people, they're like, I'm here for the romance. I'm not here for a cutesy, bratty little kid, and I have read some books sometimes where I'm just like, I really don't like this kid. Like, let's move on from this scene, But I really tried to write her in a way where she was funny and realistic and relatable. I used to teach pre-K, so it's kind of similar to that age group. Finley's 5 years old. So I was really influenced just by a lot of the kids that I knew, and I tried to make her as realistic as possible. And Mason, he's such a good dad to her, and he makes mistakes sometimes. He messes up, that's kind of part of his character arc, but I think people are really going to like those scenes where it's Mason and Finley talking about this situation that her biological mother has put them in. There's some emotional scenes in there. And so I warn everybody that this book is going to make you cry. It's not going to be totally light and fluffy,
Yes, I love the pain. That's my favorite thing to hear.
I'm so excited to make people cry. And I think there will be a lot of that. I don't know, at least I hope so.
And Finley, she's in like 5th grade, 6th grade?
No, Finley's in kindergarten. She's going to be in Kendall's class.
She's really tiny. Oh, yes, that's right. Kendall teaches the little ones.
Yeah, Kendall's a kindergarten teacher. And so I guess I could talk a little bit about the premise of the book, too, if you want me to.
Yeah.
So Kendall, she's been in a relationship with this other guy. She's just been through a breakup. And so she's not really looking for a relationship. She downloaded Tinder. She's giving that a shot. She talks to Mason, and we know how Kendall is from the first book. She likes sending out her saucy pictures, and so she's been chatting with Mason. They've kind of got this date planned, but before this date can happen, he walks into her classroom on Meet the Teacher night holding hands with Finley, and they both just kind of have this, oh crap moment, and that just kind of gets the ball rolling.
I can't even imagine. I never was on like dating sites or anything, but like I feel like to see somebody in real life, even just when you weren't expecting to see them, is kind of like, oh shoot, I was prepared for my big reveal. But then for it to be in a professional setting and you're like, oh, you're in my life long term. Yeah. And remind me, is Sarah still at the school at this time?
Yeah, she still works at Grissom. I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail about what she's up to now, but yeah, she plays a very active part in this book.
Her and Owen, right? They're both.
Yeah, Owen is in the book quite a lot too. A lot more than people would expect, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We get to kind of see where he's at now with the podcast. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of tried to make him like, you know who Hank Green is, the
Uh-huh.
science podcast guy. Okay. There's this TikToker, Hank Green. Some of your listeners might know about him, but he's just kind of like a really nerdy science guy. Like people on TikTok are like, Hank Green, what does this mean? You know, they tag him and stuff just to get him to explain things. And I
Uh-huh.
kind of tried to make Owen like that, like this,
Mm-hmm.
you know, this influencer who's just really into science, and now he's got a YouTube channel, he's got a book out, and so like he's, you know, he's moving on to bigger and greater things in this second book, and we get to see a lot of that happen.
Yeah, I always love when people do like a little nod to the characters from previous books, and so
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like we waited so long for Owen and Sarah, and I wasn't
Yeah,
done with them, so that's good that they'll
yeah.
get to be in this book.
Yeah, I think people will be pleasantly surprised at how much Sarah and Owen play into the actual plot in this book.
Well, yeah, well, her and Kendall are like close friends, so
Oh
she's
yeah.
got to have somebody to talk to about what's going on.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So you had said earlier that you had like taught pre-K before.
Mhm.
What were you doing like while you were writing? Like what got you into writing that first? I don't. Well, you maybe didn't say it was your first one, but you'd been working on like an enemies to lovers before.
Yeah, this was
Um,
the first book that I completed for sure.
mhm,
I stopped teaching. My son does online school, and that's kind of I'm basically like a stay-at-home mom slash teacher for my son, because
mhm,
his online school involves a lot more from me than I ever would have expected.
mhm.
So that's kind of my main focus. But so I have a lot of time to write, which is I think why I finally was able to sit down and complete a book after not completing one for so long.
And had you always been just like kind of writing creative stories, or like when was
Mhm.
the first time you tried to like write a story?
I have honestly been writing since I was a kid. And I was really more into like I could plot and outline a book like crazy. I like, you know how I said I have a lot of unfinished manuscripts in my
Mhm,
file. So many of those are just outlines, or they're just the vibes, you know.
mhm.
They're not anywhere close to being a completed story. And I don't know why Lesson Learned was the one that just kind of clicked for me, and I was able to finish it in just a few months. But yeah, I've always just been into writing creative stories.
Is your son creative? Like, does he like to read?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's started to write some short stories himself, which he's 12, so
Cute.
his are a little goofy, you know, but I see a little bit of that creative spark in him, so I love to see that.
That's sweet. So, because of your experience working as a teacher, is that sort of
Mhm.
why you felt like have you tried to write stories that are about non-teachers?
Yeah, yeah, and I think for me a big part of it too was I kept trying to write young adult romance. I think
Hmm.
like almost every story, every book that I sat down and tried to write was young adult. And then the very first time that I tried to write adult contemporary romance, it was Lesson Learned, and I was able to complete it in 3 months. So I don't know if it was just
Wow.
the, you know, switching up the genre that worked for me. I'm not really sure. But something with this just clicked, and I was able to complete it.
And what did that writing process look like? Like you just got up and wanted to write scenes every day that popped into your head? Or are you really, really diligent with yourself? Like 3 months seems so fast.
Yeah, it was. And I've never been able to write so fast. But I just had to I did kind of have to make a routine where I would write for a couple hours in the morning, and then spend, you know, 3 hours or so helping my son with his schoolwork and things like that, you know, and then take care of other, you know, things around the house. And then I had about 2 hours I would write every night. So I had to make sure I was writing every single day, you know, and I was just on a roll with this one. I couldn't stop.
Hmm. And so did you, while you were writing this, you kind of knew like, okay, this is going to be the book that I'm going to put out?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely an outliner. So what I usually do is I go chapter by chapter with the outline. Okay, here's a summary of what happens in this chapter. And then my second pass through this outline, I'm like, okay, let's turn some of these summaries into full paragraphs. Okay, here's what's happening in this scene, what's going to happen in this scene. And I break it down, and I go through it 3 or 4 times until my outline is it's almost telling me everything that needs to happen in this chapter. And I go in and I fill in dialogue. And so it's kind of a weird process, I guess, just kind of expanding my outline every time I go through it. But that's what really worked for me.
And so as you're writing this, did you know that you wanted to publish it yourself, or had you entertained like working with an editor or like a publishing company?
I sort of knew from the beginning that I wanted to self-publish. I was following a lot of indie authors on Instagram and just kind of learning about the process, seeing how it all worked. And I know for a lot of people, the reason why they turn away from self-publishing is because of the, all the marketing and all the extra work that you have to do going into it, which can be a nightmare for some people. But I don't know if you can tell, but I really enjoy that aspect of it. Like, Instagram is my real job. Like, authoring is just my side job. Like, Instagram is my job. Or at least I feel like it is. But I really enjoy that part of it. I like being in control. I liked being able to choose my cover artist and, help decide what's going to be on the cover and what everything's going to look like. And I just like being in control of those things. And, when you're traditionally published, you don't necessarily get a say in those things. So that was kind of my big push to self-publish.
Had anyone like edited your book for you or read it and given you feedback?
Yeah. I had alpha readers, like some author friends that read it, and then a whole group of beta readers. I had a lot of teachers read Lesson Learned. Because even though I was a pre-K teacher, 5th grade's a little bit different. So I wanted to have some elementary school teachers, and then also had like a high school English teacher look at it and just kind of help me decide, okay, this is maybe not how it actually works, or, it would probably be more like this in a school. I wanted it to be as accurate as possible. So I had a lot of teacher beta readers. And then as far as the editor, I did have a professional editor, and then for the same thing for the second book as well.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I had seen, I think there are some people that seem to always do beta readers and then we'll do ARC readers. And so I was curious about your decision to do that. Like, yeah, maybe you could just explain a little bit about how you see the difference between beta readers and ARC readers and how feedback from each one has kind of like driven your publishing process.
Yeah. Yeah. Beta readers, I feel like they're the ones that are there to say, like, this scene wasn't really working for me. Like, I always tell them, like, I'd rather hear it from you than from an Amazon reviewer who hated a certain part. So with love lessons, like, especially with the spicy scenes, because I feel like it can be so easy to get those wrong and make people cringe, which is not what I want to do. So I'm like, you guys, like, tell me, like, what's working for you, what doesn't, and just be completely honest with me. So with beta readers, like, I really want that specific feedback. By the time it reaches the ARC readers, though, I feel like I'm not necessarily at the point where I'm going to make any major changes, like, as far as like the plot. But like, if they see like typos or something, by all means, like, please tell me about it. Like, Lesson Learned was published with a couple typos or a few typos in the book, which I feel is like, it's pretty common. It happens. So that's something that like ARC readers can find for you sometimes. But as far as actual like issues with the plot or scenes that just weren't really vibing with them, that should all be figured out before it gets to the ARC reader stage, I feel like.
And so do you ever try to solicit like people I know you said before that you gave it to some teachers, but do you ever try to solicit like, I'd like to get teachers' perspectives on this, or like even like a principal or something that just feels like, so that it feels authentic?
Yeah, definitely. I reached out to some teachers myself, just like, I need some feedback from you guys. And I actually have a lot of the same beta readers from the first book with the second book. They all kind of came back. And this time, and this was a really scary move for me, I have other authors that I've just become friends with on Instagram. I had them beta read for me. And I don't know why it's so scary to put my work out there like that. I'm just like, this is not totally edited. It's kind of a messy draft. I feel like I had to over explain, like, it's not perfect. Please don't judge me so harshly, but of course, I mean, author friends, they tell you what you need to hear, but that's exactly what your story needs. It's another author. They're like, hey, like this scene isn't quite as strong, or this character needs to be developed a little bit better. Sometimes they're better at recognizing stuff like that. And it's so great to get that kind of feedback from them.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we here at ABF are all about. Like this, you can't, it takes a village. You can't do this by yourself. Like, it's good to get people's feedback. It's good to hear what other people think, other perspectives, even if it's not, even if it's like, oh, that's interesting to think about, but I'm not going to make those changes or whatever.
Right.
Like, it's just good to hear different perspectives. Have you ever gotten, like, particularly from beta readers, like a group of people that are like, oh, this gives me the ick, or like, I don't really like this, and then you have another group that's like, oh my gosh, this is my favorite, like, please keep this up?
Yeah. And I can't remember the scene specifically, but this just happened recently. I had one beta reader highlight something and make a comment, and they said something like, they just didn't really like what Mason said in this scene, I think. And then another beta reader highlighted it and was like, OMG, I love him for this. This is perfect. and it just kind of proves that everything's really subjective. Like, some people are going to love things about your book that other people are going to hate. And I see that in my reviews for Lesson Learned too. There are some people that aren't, they're not a big fan of the whole emotional affair aspect, which is understandable, and then other people, they love that tension. They love that angst. And that is the reason why they like the book. So everyone's different.
Yeah. This is what I was actually going to ask you about when you were talking about like marketing for yourself on Instagram, because I feel like the readers' reviews are very similar to how well you do on social media. It's like sometimes things are really working and this is great and I'm targeting this audience, and other times it isn't, and I don't know what I've done wrong or why it's not hitting the mark, but it just isn't for this particular post. How did you crack that? Like, you're very, very good at social media, and I did, like, it's really hard to be good at social media.
It is. Yeah. Thank you, by the way. It was really hard for me to figure that out. And one thing, speaking of that emotional affair aspect, when I was still heavily marketing Lesson Learned, I realized I needed to kind of put that at the forefront of my marketing, because that book was reaching a lot of people who, even though I have a warning about that in the author's note at the beginning of the book, people just skip that, or they might think like that's just a small part of the book. But the emotional affair kind of is the plot of this book. So I started kind of like, when I listed the tropes, I would make sure to mention that every single time, because I don't want anybody to be surprised that this is part of the book. So I guess just kind of being honest about what's in the book, and marketing it to the right people. I actually, whenever I very first started my Instagram account a few months before Lesson Learned came out, I started interacting with a lot of people using the hashtag teachers who read. So I found a lot of teachers who read, who were into reading rom-coms, and I just started engaging with them, got them to kind of like, interact with my content a little bit. So then whenever I did have this cover reveal and I'm like, hey, I wrote a book about teachers, I kind of had this built-in audience that was ready to read a book about teachers, and they were really excited about it. And I've kind of continued to market the same way. I target people who are into rom-coms with a little spice, not necessarily just teachers anymore, because eventually I'm not, I'm going to get away from that. But just, it's all about kind of finding the target audience and speaking to them in your posts.
And then what about your content creation, like the visuals that you use? Like, do you do a lot of research on like what's doing well on TikTok and Instagram, or are you just kind of going like based on vibes, or?
A little bit of both. I do try to put a little bit of research into it, especially looking at like what has worked for me in the past, what kind of posts people respond to. Like, I can kind of scroll through my feed and I can see, okay, this post got double the amount of likes than usual, or like I got a lot more comments on this one because maybe it prompted it, like them to answer a question or something. And I try to do things like just something that will be eye-catching, attention-grabbing, and maybe ask a question. Sometimes I try to do that. And I mean, and honestly, I take a look at like what my author friends are doing, what's trending, like for example, at Christmas time, everyone had like this little Christmas tree post where it was just like a Christmas tree, and it was like a trope tree, I think, that everybody was doing. And we all sort of jumped in and we're doing that. So a lot of times just following what other authors in the same genre are doing and building on that. Of course, giving them credit for if it's something really unique that they created. Just following trends.
I heard recently about like pinks and purples do really well for like romance and things. And I didn't, like, is that a coincidence that your color scheme is already kind of like pinks and purples, or is that intentional?
That's actually just a coincidence. I mean, it makes sense that it's, that it works with romance, but I used a lot of pink in my marketing with Lesson Learned, and I've kind of switched over to purple lately, but yeah, that's just a coincidence.
Is your third book also going to be an LL book?
Probably not. I don't want to give too much away. I was really working on that. Originally this was going to be a 3-book series. I'm like, I've got to come up with a title that's LL. And I tried so many options. I'm like, nothing is working here. I thought about things like Love in the Library or Librarian in Love. And I'm just like, it just wasn't working, and then I thought, and I don't want to keep writing about teachers necessarily either. I don't want to keep writing about teachers forever. So I might go a slightly different direction with book 3, but it's still going to be in this Woodvale series. We're still going to see some of these same characters. So
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you have like a very grounded following of teachers, then you kind of have like how many books before you're like a teacher only trope type writer?
Yeah, like we've gone through everyone in the school. Everyone has already fallen in love. There's no one left.
Maybe Principal Cates will get his love story in a first name.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, rewinding a little bit around the path of like ARC readers and beta readers.
Yeah.
Could you talk also a little bit about like a street team? I think I have a very surface level understanding of street teams and sort of like maybe how an author would use them or like utilize them.
Okay. I've kind of just learned, I'm learning as I go with this.
Mhm.
I did have a street team for my first book, and my author friend Allie Samberts, who also writes teacher romances, by the way, I don't know if you've heard of her,
Mm-mm.
but she's a really awesome author. I saw that she had a street team, and I just reached out to her. I'm like, okay, how did you get these people to talk about your book? What do you give them? What do they do for you? You know, and she really helped me out a lot with that. And um, basically what I do, I had a Google form that people could fill out. And um, the requirements that I asked of them was really just, I'm going to have certain posts for you to share. Like, for example, like my cover reveal, I had, 20, I think I ended up having 22 people were all sharing this cover reveal the same day, and like when the book comes out, they all make a post about it. And then I also sent them all PR packages. So that's, they're doing something for me. I'm giving them a physical book, some stickers, bookmarks, and stuff like that. So we're both benefiting from it.
Is it a little bit of like a hype team? Like, do you feel like do they reach out to you when they read it and you feel like you have a closer relationship with them than maybe like an ARC reader?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, the ARC team, like I don't really have high expectations from them. Like I do expect them to do a review. If they don't, I mean, I'm not going to get upset about it. Not everybody follows through. That happens, With the street team though, I kind of expect them to do a little bit more. And I see them sharing my posts a lot, and that's not even something I require from them. But a lot of these women, they're just so excited. I shouldn't say women, there's also some men. These people are just really excited about the books, and they just share the posts, and they're always there in my comments, commenting on everything, and I don't even necessarily ask them to do that. So my street team is people who are just, they're going to be enthusiastic about whatever I put out there, whereas your ARC team, they're looking for, they kind of want to read the book a little bit before everyone else, and just kind of have a free book to review. And some of them are really excited about it too, but the street team's just a little bit different.
Yeah. And are they kind of keeping an eye out for book 2 to help like promote things like that? Or is it kind of like you're here to promote this book, or is like you're here to promote Katie, or like what is the expectation?
Initially I just had a street team for the first book for Lesson Learned. And then I have seen where a lot of other authors will have a permanent street team. And I'm like, okay, let's give this a shot. And so I just put it out there, like, this is for a permanent street team. Like this group of people, they'll be there for every cover reveal, every release day, for every future book, and if they ever at any point just decide this isn't for me anymore, or life just got really busy, or for whatever reason, they can leave at any time. But just this group of people, I feel like they're going to stick with me for a while, because they're so enthusiastic.
Yeah, unless they're teachers and you decide to write a new book, then they're like, we're doing a walkout. We're only here for the teacher books.
Yeah. We wanted Kate's story, dang it.
Exactly. So, and then one of the other things that I saw that you do for like helping market yourself and your book is you've done some like live readings. Is that right? Or you've done like book signings at libraries?
Yeah, I do a lot of local book signings. I did do one live reading. I'm from a small town, kind of like Woodville in the book. And I have a really, really supportive local community. And I'm so thankful for that. I expected, honestly, when I wrote this book, I expected maybe like my family and a few random people to find me online and read this book. But my local community, oh my goodness. The day that the book came out, I dropped off a few paperback books. We don't have a bookstore, small town. I took a few paperbacks to a local like hippie store, and then a local coffee shop. They each sold like 5 copies of the book. And that afternoon, like just a few hours later, they were all sold out, because just random people in my community were just like, we've got to read this book by this local author, And then I had like a book launch party at my local library, and I cannot remember how many books I took, but I sold out of books within an hour. I mean, I was like, I had a line of people out the door.
Wow.
And I mean, and these are just people I knew through teaching or just different jobs I've had, and it's just because it's a small, supportive town. So I don't know. I feel like that might be harder for authors in a bigger city where it's not like so tight knit, but local people or indie authors should really just look into their local community for support, and like don't forget that you have people in your town who will read your book too. I don't know if it'll always be like it is in my town, but maybe I just got really lucky. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of cool to be like, oh wait, well this person like kind of lives like 20 minutes from me. It's cool just to read their book because they like live somewhere near you.
Yeah.
So you just reached out to like your local bookstore and were like, hey, I published a book. Like, would it be okay if I came and did this thing? Or do they have like a way that authors can go about like presenting their work? Or
yeah, I reached out to them, especially for my small town. Like they're, like it was a coffee shop and then just like this other random, like kind of like a crystal store, like a hippie store. They don't really sell a whole lot of books, but they were just happy to support a local author. But I've noticed that a lot of indie bookstores, like I have my book in a couple of stores in other cities, bigger towns. A lot of them have a way to reach out to them through their website. You have like an application form or something like that. And then another one actually reached out to me. So it just kind of depends on the store, but a lot of it is just me taking a chance and reaching out and just seeing it. The worst that can happen is they say no.
Are you planning on doing that same thing for Love Lessons, like doing as sort of as much of a rollout as before?
Yeah, I'm working on it, trying to get those events booked.
Yeah, so you're in a stage of like, basically you're done with the writing and now you're just doing marketing and things. Like how does it feel now that you've like finished the second one and that's about to come out compared to like your first release?
It's a relief, and then at the same time I look at all these little steps that I have to do that I did with the first book, and I'm like, it feels like I just did this. Like I'm finalizing like the back cover and writing the blurb and writing the author's note and just all those little things that you have to do to prepare a book and, before you get it out there, and booking those events and just all that little stuff. It's overwhelming, but it's also just, I can't believe that I've written 2 books and I finished them and I'm at this point. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And then where are you in book 3? Like, do you like to give your characters and their book their time to settle before you really start thinking too much about book 3? Or are you already in like your summarizing phase?
Yeah, I would like to give it some time to settle and not jump right into book 3. And I even told my husband, I'm like, I'm not going to think about writing. Like, I'm not even going to open my laptop. Like, I'm done. Don't let me think about this too much. But it's all I think about. Like, book 3 lives rent free in my head. So does book 4 and book 5, to be honest. Like, I can't escape it. So it's kind of in the outlining stage. Or just kind of like writing down bits and pieces of dialogue that pop into my head. I really do need to walk away and take a break for a little bit. I don't know. I will sometime.
I mean, that feels like the difference between those books that never really, leave your notebook or your computer screen versus the ones that you decide to get published, which is like, I can't stop thinking about this. Like, I have to put this out.
Yeah. That's exactly how I feel.
What types of books do you like to read? Like, do you do a lot of reading when you're not writing?
I do. I don't do as much reading as I used to before I started publishing books, and that makes me really sad because I have so many indie author friends that I would really like to support. So I've got a stack of books on my TBR, and so eventually I'm going to get to those. But I do read a lot of rom-com books. I've started to get into kind of like romantasy a little bit. Which was not really a genre that I thought I would be into, but I don't know, I'm giving it a shot.
What did you start with?
I did start with ACOTAR. I feel like that's kind of like everyone's go-to,
Yeah, that's good.
And I'm just kind of trying to expand it, like experience or discover other authors, I guess, that are kind of similar, write similar books. So if you have any recommendations, feel free.
Yeah, I also debuted into romantasy with ACOTAR, and granted, Fourth Wing wasn't out at the time, but that's actually the one I recommend to people who are hesitant about it, because I feel like it's very similar to Harry Potter. And so I think it's easier to visualize a lot of it. Like I had a hard time getting through ACOTAR because I couldn't, my creativity just shut off. And I was like, you've started a little bit of it at least?
Yeah, I've read the first 2 books.
Oh, okay, yeah. So when they're describing like that they have masks on and stuff, I'm like, and Sierra Spencer was the one who recommended
Mhm.
them to me. And she was like, do not Google anything. I'll be so mad at you and it will ruin everything. Don't Google
Yeah.
what they look like. Run everything through me. Because I'm, like I said, I'm 100 years old. So I don't spend a lot of time on social media. I'm not on TikTok. And so I didn't really know anything about this book.
Yeah.
And so when I was reading, I was like, masks on their face, like what the heck does this even look like?
Yeah.
And he's like a fox, like I don't get it. And it was really hard for me to like really even visualize. And also I had been reading like rom-coms or like romance books, and like SJM's writing is just very different. And I was like, gosh, I feel like my brain's like sputtering out trying to read this book. And so I had a friend who was like, I'm thinking about reading extra. I've never read fantasy before. And I was like, maybe try Fourth Wing. It feels a little bit more modern, and like if you've seen all the Harry Potter several times, I think it's easier to like visualize. That one hurts a lot more, I think. But
yeah,
that's a baby more dipping your toe into the water first.
Yeah. There's a romantasy book that I'm wanting to get into. Speaking of indie authors, my friend Jackie Egan, she wrote a book called Soul Snatcher. So that's like at the top of my TBR. Like I cannot wait to get into it. Just seeing the little snippets that she shares about it on Instagram have excited me so much. Her name's Jackie Egan, and she's working on her second book now too.
I'm gonna have to read that.
Yeah.
I feel like I had to take a hiatus from the world building, and so I was like dipping into and so I was like, it was great though because it gave me a nice time to like come back into the romance books and spend a little bit more time on social media finding some of these indie authors and reading books that maybe I wouldn't really see like on Instagram. But then every once in a while I'll have that creative juice. Like I don't think I could ever write a book. That seems like it'd be way too hard for me, but I would identify myself as a creative person. And so I love when I can read something that kind of stimulates my mind in that way. Like,
of course.
I'm having to imagine these things playing out, and that's very fun. So yeah, I'll have to give Soul Snatcher a look. That's awesome. That's very cool that you have a community of author friends.
Yeah.
That are in even different genres than you.
Yeah. It's been fun. I would not be where I am at all right now without the support of the indie author community on Instagram. Like a lot of the people who are just like regularly interacting with my posts, everything, it's other indie authors, and it's just, and sometimes getting that initial boost on a post helps other people see it later. Like it shows up in other people's feeds, and a lot of times the first few people who comment are other indie authors, just kind of like we hype each other up, and that's just been really awesome because there can be a lot of nastiness and a lot of ugliness. There could be jealousy and competition, but that's not something that I've really run into. I have just, I've just seen just a huge outpouring of support, and it's really been awesome to be a part of that.
Yeah, everybody is so nice. And I think it's a little bit, at least in part, due to the fact that like they're not just creators, they're also consumers. And so they're like, I want to read really good romance books, and these other types of stories inspire me, and so why wouldn't I want to help like amp somebody up, because I also like to read good romance books, and I want people to write good romance books I can read.
Yeah. And I don't think like I have seen, a little bit of, I guess, toxicity on threads, like I don't know if you're on threads, but like it just seems like every day there's something new on there that people are arguing about, but I think you can also just kind of shut that stuff off and just not participate in it, and just kind of see everyone as just, we're all in this together. We all have a book to sell. And it's not like these readers can only read one book. They can read all of our books. People collect them. People collect multiple editions of the same book. So, that's just kind of how I look at it.
And you don't want all that pressure on you anyway. It's like, okay, pay attention to this other indie author while I'm working on books. I'm cranking these out as fast as I can.
Yeah, exactly. Just like, and I mentioned Allie Sampertz earlier, and she also writes teacher romance, and we're constantly recommending each other's books because we recognize we have the same readers. I think we even share some straight team members, or at least we have like the same exact people that are just constantly commenting on our stuff, because why wouldn't they? We both write rom-coms about teachers, and I think it would have been really easy for us to be like, oh, well, they should be reading my books, not hers, but it's never been like that.
Yeah, that's great. That's so sweet. Admittedly, I was a little bummed when I finished your first book and saw you advertising for the second one and realized that you weren't writing about a sexy beet farmer, because if anybody could make Dwight hot, it would be you. I was like, dude, if Katie could get me to like could get me to like an engaged couple that breaks up and moves from friends to lovers. I'm also a very big enemies to lovers fan. And so to do the tropes that aren't at the top of my favorite trope list, I was like, she could write a sexy beet farmer. I would read that book for sure. But I am very excited because Kendall deserves a very good love story. I love her.
Yes. She's going to get her happily ever after.
Yeah. This is great. So where can people follow you? Where can people get love lessons, lesson learned, and love lessons when it comes out?
Both books are available on Amazon, and you can also find me on Goodreads. I've noticed that when you search my book titles, my books don't necessarily come up, so search my name. And I'm also really active on Instagram at author Katie Cawood. Instagram and Threads, I'm on both of those every day. So that's where I live.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing behind the scenes of the book. You scratched an itch I've had since I finished. And for sharing about your tips and tricks for being an indie author and sitting down and chatting.
No problem.
It was so nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you, and I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much.